Okay guys, welcome back. So we're going to get into the technical stuff a little bit more now. We kind of obviously introduced why we're here and kind of the cool stuff about being at the headquarters of Accra Golf, but we want to talk a little bit about shaft development, shaft design, the evolution of how you transition from one product line into another. So right now we're just about to head into the PGA Show time. So test season has kind of, you're in the middle of test season right now.
Yeah, we start designing shafts almost a year in advance.
Right. Okay.
And really, a lot of our shafts come from all different aspects of the golf industry. The tour obviously drives a lot of our designs.
Yep.
The tour is kind of a neat place because new products are introduced out there, and things like golf balls and heads
For sure.
influence what we do in our shaft designs. Yep. And so certainly the PGA Tour gives us that insight of new products coming out that we can certainly look at how we design a shaft to match that, maybe perform better or optimize flight conditions and stuff like that. Other places we get ideas from is our fitters.
Yeah.
So, I mean, club fitters are dealing with the public every day, whether it be a scratch golfer or whether it be a high handicapper. And they see lots of things that maybe they can give us input on, and we can look at designing shafts around those things. Because, you know, majority of people that are buying golf shafts aren't tour players.
Right.
So we have to look at all different levels. Now, whether we design a shaft for a tour player and then kind of, when I say dummy it down, it's a wrong terminology, but obviously lighter weight, softer flexes, because that technology might work.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, you know, we sit around as a group here, and we'll sit around our office at the boardroom, and we'll bang out ideas of how can we do things that are more beneficial for club fitters. And again, like I said sort of earlier on, we were talking, certainly everything we do has club fitters in mind. So we're looking at how can we take a design and make it you know, more applicable for club fitters to be able to play around with flex, play around with balance points and things like that. Right. So, I mean, ideas for shafts come from all different places. And it's kind of neat the way they sort of evolve into an end result.
Yeah, for sure. I love what you said at the start of that with the influence of the ball and the head on shaft design. Yeah. I mean, shaft designers, you guys, you have to be so nimble, so flexible that if one little thing happens, I mean, obviously, wasn't that long ago, TaylorMade had the whole kind of SLDR campaign.
I was going to bring that up.
Yeah, I mean, that's it, you know, and the whole kind of philosophy behind what if that's going to be the hot driver of the year, your design philosophies have to change a little bit towards that.
Oh, 100%. I can go through, and in fact, I just did a seminar over in the UK last week, and it was really interesting. We went through all of our shafts we've introduced in the last 10, 12, 15 years. Yep. And everyone has a story. Right. And usually it's influenced by something, whether it be fitters or whether it be something like that. Like one of our first shafts we came out with was because when we first started, the Pro V1 had just kicked in.
That's right.
And all of a sudden,
changed everything about
all of a sudden, nobody could get the ball in the air, basically, and the heads were still really small heads. And, you know, so we were creating a shaft to help get the Pro V1 in the air, but also, you know, control spin and give people, you know, basically dispersion issues, stuff like that. But then, you know, then the SLDR is a great example. Our concept series shaft was based solely on that. We needed to find something that, you know, helped launch the ball because it wasn't spinning at the time, but also give stability. So we created a, you know, a 360 weave that went all the way down the shaft that gave stability, but still had some kick to it. And all of our shafts have a story like that. And it's really interesting, and they come from all different places.
I mean, it's fascinating when we get a chance to pick the brains of you guys. And balance point is another one that we hear a lot of people, you know, ask us about. I think on tour this year, Tennessee Orange was obviously a really popular shaft for a while. Yep. It kind of came and then it kind of went a little bit. And there's trends like that, you know, I think, and it's so interesting to see because we were talking a little bit earlier about head weights. Yep. You know, and Tennessee Orange, as an example, is obviously a very widely used shaft and a very good shaft, but it's going to change your swing weight of your driver by 5 to 6 points. Yeah.
Were guys looking for that? Like, do you think that's why they made that change to say, I want my swing weight to be different? Because you'd think they'd be playing, like Rory and Tiger, they've probably picked D4, D5, and they've played that for 15 years.
Well, there's a whole combination of effects that happen from that. So some players like the feel of a counterbalance shaft. Okay. Yep. Some people like, and most tour players are used to using a low balance point shaft, will stay with that for most of their career, and vice versa. Right. You know, something like a real counterbalance shaft, and we certainly have some counterbalance shafts too in our line. We always have. To match up flex, all of a sudden, or sorry, To match up swing weight, you have to add weight to the head.
Right.
When you add weight to the head, now all of a sudden you're influencing the flex of the club.
So the tip section of the shaft will flex
heavier
more?
head, you're going to flex more. So now all of a sudden you've gone from a shaft that might be a traditional X flex or whatever you think it should be. You add 6 grams, 7 grams of weight to the head, and all of a sudden now your flex becomes a half a flex, a quarter flex different. Now to a tour player, that's a big difference.
It would be, yeah.
So all of a sudden now you've got to you either got to tip it more and you start playing around with things. And so certainly there's a whole number of factors that get influenced in when you have a shaft that's sort of unique.
Yeah.
And the same thing happens with some very low balance point shafts. But they are options for certain players, and certain players do like the feel, and it does create good results for certain guys. Most shafts fit into a sort of a mid-range of balance point, but the balance point does not only affect feel, it affects ball flight, it affects a whole bunch of different things.
Because we hear the question quite often, and I can understand why it's confusing, bend point, kick point, now we're adding balance point. So when you say a counterbalance shaft, does that mean that more mass of the shaft, if it weighs 60 grams, counterbalance means most of the 60 grams is up high.
Is in the butt section of the shaft.
Yeah, and vice versa.
Yeah, so we tend to go more off balance point than anything else.
Is that right?
Yeah, the bend points and things, it's really quite minute, the difference in a high bend point.
Really?
When you bend a shaft and you kind of do this, there's not a big difference in a high bend point shaft and a low bend point
Because that's what everyone hears the marketing.
Such a small part.
Yeah.
Is that right? That's the way a lot of people think, you know, a low bend point's down here and a high one's up there.
That's what everyone thinks.
It's in this little small section.
So you're talking about moving the bend point, you know, millimeters
it's
or
that
whatever.
Marketing jargon, isn't it? I think that, you know, we try to break that stuff down a little bit. Gavin and I had a chat earlier on about sort of the designation of shafts to flight. You know, in a high launch shaft and a low launch shaft, and how in certain person's hands that can flip reverse and it can do the opposite of what you think.
Sure. Oh, definitely. I mean, obviously, you know, the impact position of the shaft will affect, you know, the dynamic loft of the shaft of the club will affect the flight, and certainly you can get a shaft that we consider, or that people consider, a high launch shaft, which usually means it's got a softer tip section.
Softer tip, okay.
But I mean, you get some people all of a sudden get lag on impact, and all of a sudden you're de-lofting it.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm a perfect example. I get a shaft that's too soft for me. I tend to hit it low right, which most people say it's going to, for you might hook it.
Should go the other way, yeah. I mean, we've gotten some weird results with me hitting softer shafts. Sometimes they're low, sometimes they're left, right. There's no real, it's just inconsistent, I guess.
There's a greater percentage of people that would go with the sort of the nominal, the standard thing, but certainly there's outliers, and it depends on your swing, and there's so many swing variables. We talked about that. But yeah, so there's all different options that way with you know, and balance point affects a lot of those things.
And there'll be so many people, I think, will just, you know, be watching this going, that's me. You know, I tried that shaft and it was supposed to do this and it done the opposite. And that's the thing, you know, the deflection profiles of these shafts are so unique to the player and how they load them and how the release point. And we were chatting earlier on about, you know, the sort of hand speed and when the hand slowed down and when the club head accelerates and how that influences how the shaft deflects, and it's all really unique.
Well, we're seeing a lot of that in 3D motion capture and stuff. We're seeing a lot of those kinds of things, and we're learning a lot more about what happens to a shaft during a swing. And we've been learning that for years, but it's getting, the technology is greater and greater, and now, you know, club fitters have access to that technology, so you can actually do a real apples to apples testing. It's one thing for us as a shaft manufacturer to tell you something, but we have, you know, we have some very stiff tip shafts, which you would consider to be, you know, a low flying shaft, and there are times when you might be fitting somebody and all of a sudden you're getting higher launch out of it. And you go, what the heck? But I mean, some people, it's just the way they load the club.
It's the way that the club gets delivered,
Exactly. So we're holding some of the prototype. Matt just hit some of the new stuff, which is
really cool.
Which is a huge treat to try some of the new product line for next year. Accra don't cycle through shafts, you know, every year.
No.
There's a good sort of consistent cycle to all the products.
Yeah, we used to have 3 main lines within our array of lines that we offer, and what we try to do is change one over each year. So we have a 3-year life cycle typically.
For each product line.
For each product line. And the idea behind that is, you know, when you're dealing with club fitters, we're not being pushed by OEMs or manufacturers to come up with something new this year. You know, we don't have investors in our company that are pushing for, you know, for something new to come out this year. So we can do things to allow club fitters to get used to a product. And certainly as you know, as a club fitter, I mean, you develop an understanding of how a shaft reacts with different types of swings over time. And sometimes, you know, your first 6 months of using a shaft, you're learning about it. And we want to give our club fitters a chance to be able to really get an understanding of how each of our products works with different players. And we find, I mean, usually we have most success with a shaft in its second and third year.
Is that right?
Well, because guys are getting used to it.
Yeah,
I mean,
it takes that time.
You've got 200 and how many shafts in your wall. You're not going to learn a new shaft like that.
Yeah.
So it allows us to kind of fit into your fitting matrix kind of thing and understanding how they all work. And certainly all of our shafts have such different profiles. We're talking about balance points and torque and swing weight, stuff like, or profiles.
Yeah.
So I mean, it gives you a chance to understand it more.
For sure. I think in going towards this shaft, because this is such a unique design. You've been excited about this one for a little while because you saw some crazy tour results with some tour players that were really not what people would have expected.
Well, this one, and again, we were talking earlier on about new materials being available and things we can do, and what we wanted to do with this shaft here, and it was really an idea from one of our tour reps. Actually, Sean Mullen came up with the idea to really kind of a little bit go back to the future, meaning some kind of a design we had done a long time ago, which was a very responsive tip and very low torque. But now with the materials we have available, we can make it much lighter. It used to be like an 80-gram type thing. It wasn't really for the public, the regular consumer. So we kind of went back to the drawing boards and we came up with a really unique design that's kind of off the charts in some ways for us with some specs that are available in it. And right off the bat, we had some great success, even with some tour players that you would never expect to excel with that type of profile.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, guys that needed low spin, you're giving them sort of a more responsive tip shaft, and all of a sudden they're getting low spin. And that's kind of a cool thing.
It's the complete opposite of what everyone's expecting.
Yeah. And certainly, it's always fun to come out with a new design that really is kind of like dramatic. It's when we it's not just a little bit more responsive to the tip, or it's not just a little bit lower torque.
Yeah, you guys are going.
Which
further.
is.
You've gone, but you've almost gone to the point where they need to feel something different in order to be interested in it.
Yeah, I think you have to go to extremes a little bit to really give you the wow factor, and that's what you guys are looking for when you're fitting somebody is something to actually perform differently.
Right.
If you get three shafts that are all very close, I mean, then you're making a decision. If you get something that really performs differently, good or better, sometimes it may not work for you, or good or worse. But the idea is to give you something different.
Yeah. Well, you were hitting that particular prototype shaft, the new one. I don't think you realized how light and soft.
So I didn't ask anything about it.
Exactly,
So
and I was having fun watching you hit it and watching just these laser beams going out there.
It felt great and was very consistent. You're right.
Right, and I said to you once you were done hitting it, how did it feel? It felt great, you know. But it's 10 grams lighter. It's easily a full flex. Probably even from a tipping perspective, it's probably a flex and a half softer than you would normally play. But you didn't feel like it was soft or loose or anything. And that's sometimes some of the things that you can sort of put into the shaft, some of the ingredients, you can stabilize it without stiffening it.
Yeah.
So this is very stable
without feeling
with the
stiff.
design feature, and we're specifically not going into details about the shaft because it's 2018, not 2019. But this is a shaft that's very, very stable for the characteristics.
Right. I mean, it's torsionally strong, but it also has some movement, some deflection in it.
Very
so
cool.
it's kind of a neat little. It's a cool design. We're
so how do you? Because that experience is fun for me because I like testing stuff without knowing much about it.
Right.
And Ian
it's a great
usually
way
does
to
that
do
for me. Can you convince a tour player to do that? Will they say, I want to try that shaft, and you don't tell them much about it, just try it, kind of thing? Usually,
so our tour reps know the players very well, and especially the ones that they have relationships with. We also work really closely with the manufacturer reps out there, and they obviously know the players. And so certainly when we're testing something with a player, they have a pretty good idea of what type of profile that person likes. So I have a good friend I've talked about, Ryan Palmer. He's always used a counterbalance, talking about counterbalance shaft in his driver. And it was something, it took me a long time to actually get him to try one of our shafts. He'd been using our fairway woods and hybrids for a long time. But but I knew we weren't going to give him anything that wasn't counterbalance, because that's just something he's always been comfortable with. So certainly you understand that. Now you might have something a little different. It might be a little lower torque. It might be a little torsionally stronger all the way down the shaft. There's different things you might have in it. So you kind of know what you think will work.
Interesting.
But then the player, most PGA Tour players aren't techie guys. Some are, but most guys aren't. So they're pretty open for suggestion if they trust you. But I mean, you have 3 shots with a tour player to make a difference.
Well, that was my question: is how easy is it to lose them?
Well, I mean, when I say 3 shots, they will adjust to anything and make it go work. You and I worked with Gary Woodland that one time.
That's right.
And you have a few shots to see a real difference from their gamer.
And then he'll start
and then he'll adjust it and they'll make everything go straight. Gotcha. It'll be on the LPGA Tour or PGA Tour. But having said that, I mean, you know, again, you have a pretty good idea, and our tour reps are great in the fact that they know most of the players they work with, and they know a lot. They've dealt with them before.
Yep.
So you know, they know how to kind of dial in something that's pretty close.
Right.
But sometimes you get random ones that work.
Yeah.
You know.
That process with the tour players, it's interesting. You talk with that. I've always found that working with tour players, I have to try and think several steps ahead. If I'm with someone for an hour and a half in a bay, there's an experience to the fitting process, and you can go through some of those steps and try this, try that.
Yeah.
You know, I always felt like working with a tour player, you have to accelerate that 5 or 6 steps on.
They don't want all
and,
that.
And think of the Rubik's Cube of adjustments that go on, and if you change this, these other 5 things will happen at the same time.
Yep.
And then, you know, I remember we were scrambling around trying to, because the Canadian Opens is an event that doesn't have the tour truck. Right. So we were scrambling around because we were making a length change. We had to then add head weight, and we were trying to make those changes, those little alterations to make the club balance without even Gary really knowing.
Yeah.
You know, this was going to be more of a finished product being handed to him to try, but you know, we're kind of as a group trying to make that kind of those adjustments as you go, and that's a challenge I think with working with tour players. At times the window's a little bit shorter.
That is interesting.
You know, I have discussions with our tour reps all the time, and I've worked on tour for a little bit too, and I mean, quite honestly, your customers get a much bigger experience, greater experience than most tour players get.
People don't realize that.
I mean, now tour players in the off season will go and they'll work with their manufacturers and stuff and go through a proper, you know, good fitting. But during the course of the year, it is exactly what Ian's talking about. You know, it takes a lot of skill on the tour rep's part to understand where you're going because you don't have much time. You don't have a lot of shots. You may have one shot with your shaft, and that's it. You don't have like 7 or 8 shafts set up there like you would with your customers.
That's right.
To try all different profiles. So you're taking a shot. Now, again, there's skill involved, and they are looked after very well, and the clubs are built very well. But quite honestly, they don't get the same experience that you would at TXG. I promise you that.
And that's with any, you know, whoever you guys use out there, and you know their capabilities from a fit and build standpoint. It is so true that the level of detail is often a lot higher at a custom shop.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yes,
the interesting thing I just want to touch on really quickly is viewers love blind testing. Yeah. I think, and we're going to do more of it. I think the concept of blind testing to people is just so, I guess, interesting because there's no bias that gets in there.
100%.
But it's funny to hear you say that that's like the last thing that a tour player would do for the most part, because you can't really blind test with them to some degree because you know their preferences, you know what they're gonna like, and their feel is so heightened. Would you say fitting someone who's like a 15 handicap, you can get away with that process more because they're not likely going to be able to feel those differences.
Wouldn't it be great to have a whole wall of black shafts?
Yeah, that would be different.
Absolutely.
Now, it would kind of suck for us. We like Accra on there.
I know. But, just a little one in the corner,
But having said that, no, I mean, again, you just don't have as many shots when you're on tour as Ian has when he's fitting somebody. But I think most of your customers generally don't know the profile of XYZ shaft that they're dealing with.
Yeah, that's fair.
So, I mean, really, they are leaving it up to you to fill them in on what they're actually doing. And probably during the fitting, you're explaining them, I'm going to a stiffer tip shaft or something like that, or maybe wait till the end of it. But I mean, it's a process there where it is kind of blind testing. You get some golf geeks out there, and I'm sure a lot of people watching this would fit into that.
They'd like to know the.
Well, they might know the profiles, but I mean, but a lot of guys don't.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and truly knowing the profiles, I think is that's the other part. Is kind of, I think sometimes the labeling or the marketing behind certain products can sometimes mask the true performance characteristics. So we see it in the field.
Well, you've seen 100. 200 people a year hit the same shaft, and you've seen their performance, whereas someone's gone online and read the spec sheet and gone, I know what that's going to do.
I know.
You don't.
Well, we were chatting earlier about sort of the holy grail of fitting is to become to make decisions from a non-emotional, non-biased standpoint.
Yeah.
And I think that's such an important part of getting to the right conclusion is making sure that you can get with someone who has those two characteristics when they're fitting you.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
But that's hard. Everybody does have biases a little bit, and it's a question of, I mean, it's a question of sort of understanding that your fitter is there to help you out, and trusting your fitter to find the best thing for you. And hopefully, you know, I'm sure most people do have that belief going in. But sometimes I'm sure you have to battle a guy that always has used this type of shaft for a long time and wants that, or he's used X Flex his whole life, and I should have an X Flex shaft.
Yeah. I know. No, it's true. It's very, very true. So why don't we just one last little segue. We were having a little discussion again earlier about steel and graphite and the benefits of both, and both have their place. And obviously, in the iron market, steel has been obviously for the longest time recognised as the standard material, but that's changing.
It's changing. I mean, steel shafts do offer a certain profile and a certain performance that is very difficult to match up with graphite. But graphite is obviously you gotta understand, steel is a homogeneous material. It's basically generally one wall thickness. And it's the only way to change flex is by weight and or the diameter of the shaft, and you can only make the diameter so big, or the reduction of diameter can change a little bit with the step patterns and things like that. But they're minor changes. With graphite, especially in the lighter weights, we have so many options that we can take a 50-gram shaft, which is 1.5 times or almost 1.5 times lighter than a traditional steel shaft, and we can make it stiffer than a steel shaft.
Which is crazy.
So I mean, the material aspects of it, we can do crazy things. Having said that, the negative to that, especially in the heavier weights, is as you get to make a graphite 120 grams, 130 grams, you have to use so much material that it dampens the shock. And one of the benefits of graphite is that it dampens the shock. But when you get to that point there, you lose some feedback, and a lot of better players really like that feedback from steel.
That's right.
And if you get too much material in there, you lose some of that. So that's one reason why you don't see a lot of graphite on tour. Because those guys want 120, 130, 135 gram shaft. And with graphite, you tend to have a totally different feel. Now, it's not saying it's worse.
I was just going to ask, is it just a different feel?
It's a different feel.
It's just not,
and it's getting used to that. And tour players are creatures of habit like anybody else. They're used to it, and they've grown up using a specific thing. Now, there's more and more steel shafts also that have, the Project XLZ, does have multiple wall thicknesses. And that's really cool. So steel's doing some really cool things to kind of offer some of the same things that graphite can offer. But there's certainly, especially in the lightweight, there's so many options you can do with graphite. And even in the heavier weights, again, being able to change, making a very stiff butt section, a softer tip section, playing around with torque a little bit, which you just can't do with steel. But there's benefits to both. And it's not that one's better than the other by any means, but certainly there's more options with graphite. So.
You just got to find what's right for you, don't you? That's right. I think the ability to influence and manipulate the bend profile and the material, and whether you have another material like tie mesh in the tip section, or have a weave in the butt section to stiffen up, those are the benefits of working with graphite. And I know that having just changed to graphite in my iron shafts, I'm playing the same weight of iron shaft I've always played, but I'm now in graphite. I had a few issues that I needed to go to that, and I played my first few rounds with it and absolutely loved it. So you're absolutely right. The sort of integration of graphite, it becomes steel, because I've always played steel. Try get Tiger Woods out of that X100. It's not happening. It's just not happening, right?
I mean, you got to understand. I mean, there is a shock dampening value to graphite that's great for certain types of players. One thing we've been able to do with graphite is add things like the tie mesh and the weave sections, which one of the knocks against graphite was consistency of how far you hit it. Because graphite certainly recovers faster than steel. So if it recovers faster, you can get what they call jumpers. We have that sometimes with some of the bigger heads too, where they get jumpers. But one thing we've been able to do with graphite more and more so now is use materials that reduce that. So we can make graphite now as consistent as steel for distance control. And certainly torque we can get as low as steel. So from a dispersion standpoint, you can certainly match it up. But it is a different feel. And golf, another thing we talked about earlier on is the idea of you get used to something, and it's hard to always change from what you're used to, but that's fine. There's options.
And that's it. I think, from that feel perspective, the feel is what creates timing, and finding the golf club in the right space at the right time is what allows a player to be consistent and get that feedback from the club that they were looking for. And that's, if you lose that, that's when your timing goes, and obviously your consistency is gone. So it's options though, isn't it? I think that's what it comes down to. It's having a variety of options for all sorts of players, from extremely lightweight, like you said, 40 grams, all the way up to 135. That's the key.
And when you guys are out on tour, obviously you get guys that are interested in testing driver shafts, 3-wood shafts, hybrid shafts. How many of them are willing to try a graphite iron shaft out of 100?
Right now, as far as I know, there's nobody on tour using a graphite iron shaft.
Like a true graphite. Is that right?
As far as there were 2 guys who were pretty big names that were using graphite up until recently. They're both using actually true temper steel shafts now.
So they've switched up.
So I mean, it's a difficult one. It really is. Now, Champions Tour is a different thing.
Is that right?
But again, the shock dampening really comes in those guys. And again, I don't think it is any knock against the performance.
No,
in fact, I know it's not. Yeah. It's more a what I'm used to, and certainly, you know. It's competitive out there amongst shaft companies, and it's the least point of resistance kind of thing is steel. They're used to it.
Yeah. And then the problem is people look at the tour as that's the product that does the best for the best players in the world, so that's what I should look at. Yeah. So the obstacle for you guys, if you want to sell graphite shafts, is, well, no one uses them on tour. Why am I using it? But it's the complete opposite. Yeah,
the tour doesn't drive everything. I mean, certainly we have shafts that we don't even really introduce on tour. They're our most popular shafts.
Right.
So I mean, you know, the general public isn't tour players, and that's where I keep going back to. It's easy to talk about tour, and it's fun to talk about tour. But quite honestly, we're designing products for the average golfer, and the average golfer doesn't swing like a tour player.
That's right.
So you know, there's a totally different perspective when you start looking at it that way. You can kind of go in, this is what tour players use, but also you should be looking at what works best for you.
Yeah.
And that's where, I mean, you have, I don't know how many iron shafts options you have, but it's a whole bunch of them.
Yeah.
And the idea is it gives guys a totally different, not only profiles to choose from, but different materials to choose from, and which gives you different feel and performance.
Yeah, I mean, we have 150 iron shafts on the wall, and one half is dedicated to graphite. We literally split it 50-50 because we know that we can go 65, 70 grams up to 130 in steel. We can go, you know, lighter with different butt diameters, and we have more options over in graphite.
Sure.
So for obviously the customer we see, that gives us all the options that we'll ever need, which is what we want.
That's interesting stuff. Yeah.
Okay, guys, I hope you hung in there with us as we kind of got through the technical stuff. That's what we enjoy, and hopefully that's why you guys, you know, are tuning into this channel, because this is what it's all about, getting into the tech and ultimately what's best for you guys, and getting access to the best knowledge and the best equipment in the world. So we really appreciate Gav's time having us up here to do this with him. So we've got a little bit more to do today, and then we'll be heading back home. But we hope you enjoyed this part of the episode, and we'll see you again soon.